This evening, we're going to be talking about the 7 deadly sins and then the 7 virtues that go along with them, okay? So I'm going to explain that as best I can so that it makes sense, because I think a lot of times when we think about some of these old world ideologies, they get confused and misinterpreted, okay? And part of the reason why this is relevant is because most of the world wars are fought on the basis of religion, okay? And most of the distortions that manifest on planet Earth are based on distorted principles that people have picked up from dogma that is taught improperly, okay? So I don't like the term the 7 deadly sins, but it's something that everybody will recognize and everybody will know what I'm talking about. So the way I want to teach it is actually corrections that we can make. So it's not that 7 is the magic number. There's multiple distortions that we have in terms of our mental construction of how we think of the world. But these are a good 7 to start with, and corrections that you can make each and every day that will improve your life, okay? The front of this sheet is more so when you go home, and it's just a quick little cheat sheet, okay? Or chart to be able to figure it out quickly. Now, I'm going to go through quickly the 7 that the Bible talks about. And again, in terms of spirituality, I want to be really clear that I don't subscribe to any religion. However, I grew up with the knowledge of the Bible first and foremost. But you'll notice with all of the different traditions, it doesn't matter what religion you're looking at, they were really derived from a central theme and a central place, all the way back to the Sumerians, okay? If you study history and even beyond the Sumerians, okay? A lot of that knowledge would be lost with, great catastrophes and wars, and a lot of that happened over history. So we don't really know the complete picture of it. We just have bits and pieces that we have to kind of weave together, okay? So, traditionally, in the traditional language, it was called wrath, gluttony, envy, lust, greed, pride, and sloth. I'm going to interpret that into modern language because that really means nothing to any of us. Like when you hear those terms, we're like, what? Okay, so anger, wrath is just anger. It just means when we get into a state where we're enraged and we're acting in an angry fashion. Basically, on a vibrational level, it just means we're putting out a very chaotic frequency. So there's been lots of studies done with water, and we can notice when we have a very angry, chaotic nature to what we're speaking or what we're emitting and transmitting from our actual body that we're in, you're going to notice when that water is frozen, it's going to be a very chaotic pattern. And as we move up the scale, you're going to notice more beautiful, more geometrically balanced patterns are crystallized within the water, okay? So that's a very good scientific example that your brain can kind of pick up and understand, okay? The next one we're going to look at is gluttony. Again, traditionally people think of that word in modern times as like you're just eating too much, like you're just eating everything in sight. That's not what it means. It means to overindulge. So when we're in substance abuse, or we're drinking too much alcohol, or we're just overeating, like anything where we're taking something to the extreme and we're putting our whole aura out of balance in terms of taking something into our body. So that would be gluttonous behavior, right? It's just overindulgence. And again, overindulgence in anything is not balanced. And of course, our goal is to be as balanced as possible. Now, the third one would be envy. And envy, meaning if you look at any other being, human being usually, and look at their circumstance and you're envious of what they have or what they've created, it creates an imbalance in yourself, and it's actually very harming to yourself. So I want to teach you the principle of eradicating this distortion from your mental patterns. The fourth being lust. And this is one that is definitely permeating all of society at this point. It's over-identification with the form of a body and not understanding the true nature of what divine union means and why it was created in the first place, okay? So I really want to get into that, and I want to have more discussions on that as well, okay? Greed. Greed just being accumulating too many things and forcing yourself down a trajectory where you are single visioned and everything else falls away but the collection of material things, okay? And it can manifest in multiple different ways, but it creates chaos within your being and it creates chaos for those that are around you, okay? The sixth being pride. This is vanity and ego, and specifically, you know, because we're in the beauty industry, some of us, this is one that is very important for us to pay attention to, because again, anytime that we are overinflating ourselves, over-identifying with the body, or fixating too much on the external, it's very harming to our spiritual path. So again, identifying that. And then seventh, sloth. Again, that doesn't make any sense in modern language. I think of a big lazy sloth. But basically that means non-action or just apathy. The inertia where you're doing nothing and creating nothing and basically almost feeling sorry for yourself. It may be depression, but we don't want to, you know, mark depression with a bad name either, because depression and sadness are kind of connected in a different way. But this is where you've just kind of given up and become okay with the underlying currents of laziness, and it's not healthy for your being, okay? Then we look at the other side of the coin. So what you want to achieve if we're looking at the highest possible expression of what you can attain here on earth. So the opposite of anger is patience and temperance, something that we want to cultivate. And again, something that's going to balance our nature and make us feel very whole. Again, we're all going for that wholeness and that peace of mind. The opposite of overindulgence would be moderation, logic, and wisdom. Again, having the wisdom to conduct yourself in a manner where you're not sloppy and you're not chaotic in nature. The third being gratitude and thankfulness and love. If we're always in an energy of thankfulness and gratitude and love, everything is going to be operating at that high vibrational level, okay? 4, the opposite of lust being purity, innocence, and again, love. So understanding how to cultivate that within ourselves and what that actually means, because it's a dialogue we don't often have, especially with our young people. We get taught sex education in middle school, but we don't get taught the proper principles of what divine union means and what it means to enter into a relationship, whether it is a same-sex relationship or a relationship, you know, with two male and female, right? The fifth being charity and generosity would be the opposite of greed. The sixth, the other end of the spectrum from pride, is humility, understanding how to embody humility and grace. And then again, the seventh would be diligence and action. So I'm going to break each one of these down for you guys tonight. And then we're going to also talk about how to actually implement it, anything that you guys are having struggles with. So I'll probably go through the first 7, have a little break of discussion, and then go through the next 7 if that's helpful for everybody. Okay, so the first, distortion. And again, we always want to think of any negative behavior as a distortion in thinking. So when we think about the way that we create our thought forms, it's just improperly perceiving reality. That's all it is. It's not a sin. You know, the way that it's been taught historically is, okay, you're going and sinning, it only creates more self-doubt and self-judgment. We don't want to do that. So again, this is just a simple correction that we can make within ourselves. And as we correct this behavior, and as that becomes a stability within our own mind, body, spirit complex, then we can also teach others how to do that. And that's the ultimate goal, is the more stable we become, the more individuals we can help lift up and create that stability within their self as well, okay? So again, anger is an energy that will harm and hurt others. It's one end of the spectrum that will certainly cause a chaotic energy to happen in your life. Anybody that's been on the receiving end of anger will understand that. It tends to be a more masculine trait. So it tends to be the emotional go-to of men rather than women, but that doesn't mean that there aren't women out there that will throw temper tantrums, essentially, okay? But what you have to understand about that energy is generally feminine energy will tend to be in sorrow when there's something chaotic happening. They'll tend to be very almost chaotic in terms of their, they're sad, they're frustrated, they're crying. Men will display this kind of erratic behavior through anger. And both are very frustrating depending if you're a dominant masculine or if you're a dominant feminine. And please understand, in terms of human beings that are incarnate on the earth right now, there is feminine energy that will appear in a masculine form, and there's feminine energy that will appear in a feminine form, and vice versa, okay? So we don't have to think of it as purely in a male body. It can really incarnate in any body, but it's whatever your dominant, field of energy is, okay? And so generally, again, what we find within the masculine and feminine energy, it's very difficult for feminine energy to understand masculine chaoticness. It's very hard for masculine energy to understand feminine chaoticness. And actually, that both distortions really throw the other off. So when a man is around a really hypersensitive, woman that is freaking out, essentially, it's really difficult if she's crying and, very, very emotional, for a masculine energy to deal with that. Whereas a female or a feminine energy around a very angry male, it's very difficult for that feminine energy to understand that anger that's coming out, okay? So if you feel rage boiling up within you, because we both have the masculine principle in ourselves and the feminine principle, so this is going to affect both equally, understand that you have to start paying attention to that state within yourself, okay? So really pay attention to how your own personal vibration feels, how chaotic you find your field of energy becoming when you're enraged or when you're in anger, how your decision making becomes very flawed and illogical. Stop and take a breath. I would suggest that if you find that rage is coming on, step away from it, step back. Don't engage with anybody that's in front of you until you take the time to assess what's going on, okay? In that time, understand and put yourself in that other person's perspective. It doesn't mean that you have to think they're right. You just have to take a moment to understand where they're coming from. And usually you can see where they're coming from without agreeing with it. Maybe you think they're completely wrong, but it will stop you from lashing out and attacking. And again, attack is kind of the primal problem that's happening in terms of planet Earth right now, is that we jump to attack. It's not even necessarily a bad thing. If you look at the animal world, that is a very primal instinct to attack. But part of what we're trying to do with our human civilization is to augment our spiritual ascension and get to the point where attack is not our first go-to mechanism, and that we embody a lot of these higher principles when we're going through daily life. Okay? Now, obviously, it's something that you're going to need to be paying attention to regularly. Now, have any of you had any examples lately where you felt pissed off, irritated, something has thrown your balance off that you want to share? And it's all about coming to a place where you can identify the emotion that you're going through. And we have to understand as well, our emotional state is actually the currency of the universe. So when we emit an emotion, it makes waves. So if you think of the quantum field, it's actually making a wave pattern and it's affecting everything that we perceive in reality. And when you start understanding that, you will be paying very close attention to what you are transmitting, because you become a transmitter of everything that you want to attract back to you. Most beings on planet Earth are very unconscious of this process, and so they're walking around and their life is just happening to them. Once you understand the principal laws of the basis of how the universe was created and founded, you will start to be able to manipulate space and time, not in an egotistical way, but so that you can serve others more, in a more proper fashion. Now, the next distortion that I want to talk about would be anything that's overindulgent. So again, we're going to call it gluttony is what everybody knows it as, but it is anything that is obsessive compulsive. When you think about it, when you think of somebody that's addicted, okay, so let's take it to the very extreme where we're talking, crack cocaine or methamphetamines, okay, something like that, heroin. That is a very extreme form of overindulging. It's to the point where that person's mental construct can only think or basically calibrate on one loop. And that's the only program they're running, is to indulge in that activity. It's very, very, it fractures your ability to create, and it renders you helpless to that thing, to that, whatever it is that is the compulsion. And you have to be aware that you are not that compulsion, but it takes an immense amount of free will, an immense amount of your own mental strength to get out of that. And I've had, a very long history with addiction, not personally, but pretty much every one of my male figures in my life have been heavily addicted to drugs. Okay, and it's always been very difficult for me to watch it, to see it manifest, and to understand it. But I also understand it as a gift, because it's allowed me to see the absolute lowest point of darkness that essentially a being can take themselves into. And it's allowed me to have compassion for it, in the sense that, again, you realize that it is a compulsion. It's not the core of themselves that's wanting to do that. It's just they're so immersed in that loop that they've created within their brain that they can't see another version of reality. So it's about us understanding that there are multiple versions of reality, and that we are actually in charge of our own mental construct. And we are the driver of our own brains, but that can be very scary. When we realize that all of the power resides within ourselves, then we start to question ourselves. Can we really handle that power? And I think once you realize that you are actually more afraid of your own power, and that's why you fall back into some of these self-destructive behaviors, you need to dissect it and really kind of come full circle for it. Now, in terms of compulsive behavior, there are things that you can do that are very simple in terms of getting out of that, but you have to be pragmatic about it. So things like creating art. If you're in a point of anxiety, because again, a lot of overeating, overindulging, overdrinking, drugs, that kind of thing, it will stem from a state of anxiety, and generally the being wants to get out of the anxiety or out of that uncomfortable mental state as quickly as they can. They haven't taken time to figure out how to settle themselves, so they reach for that quick fix. And that quick fix is usually a substance or a food or maybe gambling. Sometimes it's compulsive gambling, whatever it is. But it's that shot in the arm that's going to take them out of their brain really quickly and, as fast as it can go, because they're in the state of anxiety, okay? And so what I suggest is that you have ways that you can do this without turning to alternative substances. So creating art is great. Having an art room, even having a little sketchbook that if you're waiting for the C train, this is what I used to do when I was young. I would get a lot of anxiety when I was riding the train because I was very empathic and I could feel people's energies. So I would have a sketchbook and I would actually sketch out the energy that I was feeling. And every time I turned the page, I would kind of create a new image, but it allowed me to draw the energy I was feeling from the external in and then place it somewhere else on my paper. So having a strategy by which you can take that anxious energy or the chaotic energy, channel it somehow, and then expel it out of you so that it's not residing in you and creating that chaos. Dancing, one of my favorite ways of getting rid of chaotic energy. Now, I don't suggest you just go like the Pied Piper and dance down the street, because that would be very awkward. But, when you have time alone, just put on your favorite music and get that energy out of your body, right? The other thing is a couple times a week, people should be dancing. If you think of Aboriginal cultures or you think of esoteric cultures, every single one of them utilize dance as part of their spiritual practice, and it's essential to us as human beings. We need to move. It actually recalibrates us. So whatever that means to you, whatever that movement, we each have our own unique rhythm or vibration and a way that we move throughout the cosmos. So like I said, you can dance in the shower, you can dance in your bedroom, you can do it completely by yourself, but that's something that you can do to really balance your aura. I suggest doing it right on the earth if you can do. It doesn't always happen in a city. When I go out to my ranch, I do it right on the grass, but something that you guys can do to really ground yourself and basically connect with the universe at large. Volunteering. Anytime you get out of yourself and you're in service, so helping others for no gain of your own will be so beneficial, not just for your karmic energy, but also for the embodiment of what you're trying to create. So when I was younger, not in this situation, because now this is part of my volunteering, but old folks' homes, animal shelters, whatever I could do to get out there and connect with other beings in a way that was just helping them, it would make me feel so good and it would reconnect me to my purpose. So it doesn't need to be something you do all the time, but once a month or twice a month, go to the soup kitchen, help make sandwiches, just reach out and connect with people. It will do so much for your soul. And in terms of distortions, sometimes if you help others that are at the very far end of the spectrum in terms of their own distortions, it will help you heal yours. I know that doesn't necessarily make sense, but you will come to see them with compassion. You will come to identify a small piece of them within yourself. And as you work with them, it actually starts to heal yourself, okay? Surrounding yourself with high vibrational people, it's really important to have, and think of like your favorite person, whoever it was, like your grandmother or, that special uncle that took you fishing, whatever it was, that just made you feel like you were at home and you were safe. Those are the people that you need to have in your life, and you need to have a healthy dose of them often, because that is what refills your soul. Not to say that you're not going to wade into the darkness and understand the darkness. This is what we're here to do. We're here to understand contrast. So again, the way that religion has perceived it for so long is the darkness is bad, it's evil, it's this, it's that. No, it's contrast. Okay, from a higher spiritual perspective, what it is, it's our way, it is the gateway to wisdom. This is how we gain wisdom. So I don't want you to think of these things that you've experienced as bad, because then you're judging yourself, you're judging others, and you're feeling like you're imperfect, and that's not correct. When we correct that distortion, it's the fact that we are learning and we are on the path to the next dimension, which is wisdom. And part of getting there is understanding what we don't want, because we can't really reside in free will if we don't understand what we don't want. So think of yourself as a mother or a father, okay? If your child is learning and you force them into a land of bubble gum and cotton candy, how you're not serving them. They haven't learned their lessons, and they're not really choosing their own fairy tale or their own correct path. So if you can understand infinite love and divine wisdom, it is the same perspective. It doesn't want to force us to choose the path of light. It wants to give us both options, because we have free will, and freedom is the most beautiful thing that you can give an individual. It is a form of empowerment. And so when we are empowered to make that choice, we actually choose authentically from our own center pole of our soul. So it's not that the path of darkness is incorrect. It is a path you can choose. It just comes with some caveats. And those caveats tend to be difficult and chaotic to deal with, okay? Usually they lead to a state of entropy where, again, it's not sustainable, because anytime we're in a state of service to self, we are devouring the other for the sake of only one. And again, anytime that exists, there's no sustainability. So part of understanding that service to others is the path of nature. It is the path of everything sustainable. So once we understand that dialogue and we really want to integrate it into the way that we maneuver through our own existence, it becomes very powerful. Okay, so the next one. Greed. So again, greed is a distortion. It often comes from a sense of emptiness and loneliness, is generally why greed will manifest. So if somebody feels extremely empty inside and they're very lonely, what that means is that they're very disconnected from the energy of love. So the way that this distortion manifests is that they start collecting material things or forms in the three-dimensional reality that we see around us. Okay, a very extreme example of this would be hoarding. Okay, anybody that has seen hoarders, and when people pile stuff all around them, that's a very extreme example of this distortion. Another very extreme example would be very, very, rich billionaires that just cannot stop. They just want to keep accumulating more and more and more, but nothing ever satisfies them. You see people with 20 Ferraris. What on earth do you need 20 Ferraris and Lambos? And there's no way that makes them happy. But part of the distortion is they get a little bit of a high when they buy something or when they accumulate something. So the distortion becomes that they basically connect the two as happiness, but a high isn't happiness, because again, it's going to go high and it's going to go low. So you're going to go up a little bit and then you're going to drop down. And anytime we're looking at that type of wealth or material accumulation, whether it is on a very small scale, you go to Winners and you buy a whole bunch of things and you're in a frenzy and you think, oh my goodness, I love all these clothes, and then you get home and you're like, oh, I don't even want to hang them up, right? It becomes a burden to you. And that's the thing. The more you buy, you're actually going to find out it's more of a burden. It actually is like a ball and chain that you're carrying around with you. And what you thought was saving you or bringing you joy becomes burdensome. And again, with people that have a lot of things, whether they own a lot of buildings or cars or whatever it is, that also comes with immense responsibility. And also, like a squirrel that has a whole bunch of nuts, then the squirrel wants to start, squawking at everyone and scratching everyone because they don't want their pile of nuts to go away. They become paranoid. You become this little paranoid squirrel on the top of your nuts, basically thinking everyone's going to steal my nut. When really, at the end of the day, it's just a stupid squirrel with a pile of nuts. Nobody wants his nuts, right? So, and you have to understand, this is the way the spiritual realm views Earth. You know, they really look down and they see all of these little human beings with all of their different piles of things, you know, guarding their things, making war over their things, you know, dividing the land up and then bombing each other, killing each other over nuts, essentially. That's when the angels and when God looks down, they don't understand. They understand. I don't want to say they don't understand, but it's just so foolish, the way that we operate and the way that we cling to material objects. So the way that we can augment or really speed up our spiritual growth is understanding that it's fine to utilize these things if it is a vehicle to help others. So even when we look at, you know, the surroundings we're in now, this is a beautiful environment, it's a beautiful school. If it is used for correct means by way of helping others, it's a correct purpose of use. But if it was to be used improperly in terms of ego and, you know, trying to show off, that would hurt others. So anytime there is abundance, it needs to be used in a sense to extend to others. When we extend, any extension is actually the energy of love. So when the sun shines down on the planet, it's extending that love and that light, and the flowers grow and the earth produces food, and all of that is an extension that creates life. And once we understand that cycle, we want to start to become part of that cycle, because that's how we create sustainability. Pride, again, can be perceived as vanity or an over-identification with the body. This is important in a lot of ways, because I think, especially with social media and especially with what we really see happening in the world today, is everyone is over-identified with the body. Whether it is, you know, plastic surgery, cutting the body, putting things into the body, you know, taking silicone and popping it here and popping it there, whatever you want to say. But it's a distortion. I mean, you can't equate cutting something up, putting something into the energy of love. And I'm not judging it, but I think we need to be aware of it and aware of the consequences that it has, because it's a treadmill that is difficult to get off. And I've had many conversations with my friends about this, that, you know, they're not interested in aging, they're not interested in losing beauty, whatever it is, and they feel very attached to their body and very attached to whatever it is that they're exchanging with the external world when they look a certain way. And that's not the purpose of what all of this was created for. It's fine to take care of our bodies. You know, we're a spirit. When you heard Jesus speak about the house is just the place the soul is for a small period of time. Jesus understood this. This is where our spirit is residing while we're in this construct of learning. And so, yes, we have to take care of it to a certain degree. We have to make sure that it's well fed, it's well hydrated, it can walk around, and if for some reason the legs aren't working and you're in a wheelchair, and you're going to do the best you can. So I don't want to, you know, teach in a way where I'm saying that if the body is not at its full functioning capacity, that you can't be a light of the world. Of course you can. You can inspire in so many other ways, okay? But whatever it is that you're doing in terms of your body, in terms of the vehicle, that's all it is. It's a vehicle. It's a very short-term vehicle that we are borrowing from the elements for a nanosecond in terms of the immensity of the universe. And so it is a learning tool. And once we identify it as such, we can know what we need to do with it, and we can conduct ourselves in a way that will propel ourselves towards the goal of why we came here. And no path is wrong. Also identifying that. No path is wrong. Some paths will take you a little bit longer, okay? And some paths are going to be really short. and you get to your destination really fast. And every soul decides their own path, and that's okay, and that's correct. So never propel judgment on anybody's path. Everybody's path is correct, and everybody will get to the destination. There's not one soul that has ever been created. There's not one speck on a speck of a particle that is not included in the totality of everything that is. It's all included. Nothing will ever be lost. So once you understand that principle, you can take a little bit of the pressure off yourself and realize that, yes, I am doing the right things, but if I fall back a couple steps, I'm still on the right path. That's still part of my learning journey. And you have to understand as well that most of us chose this, not completely on our own, because we were spiritual babies before we came to planet Earth. But we had a group of very wise souls that helped us to understand that we were coming down here and what we wanted to learn. It was pre-charted, predestined before we decided to incarnate into our little body vehicle. And then once we get down here, we forget everything. And I want to explain that a little bit in a more deep sense. If we knew everything that we were coming here to learn, it wouldn't work. The system wouldn't function. So there is a veil of forgetting that is essential to us learning our lessons on such a deep soul level that it actually integrates and actually becomes a catalyst within our own mind, body, soul complex. It is essential that we don't know what we're doing here, because if we did, it would be very easy to say, okay, I'm going to go jump off the Empire State Building because I want to go home. Right? Really? I quit. This place sucks. Like most children do. I mean, they get into preschool, Mom, I want to go home. I don't like it here. That's essentially where we're at. We're in this construct where we're being forced to learn. We decided that we were going to come here, and now we're learning what we have been predestined to learn. Okay? So, on to the next element of, I think we were talking about the body and identifying with the body. Sometimes I get on a tangent. But in terms of, again, over-identifying with the body, make sure that this becomes something that you really start to look at in your daily life. You know, are you over-identifying with the body? Are you over-identifying with other people's bodies? And this connects us to one of the other distortions, okay? Anytime we're really isolating the way somebody looks, it's a distortion. Okay, what we're meant to see is their soul. We're meant to go beyond that superficial shell and see the light within, and everybody has that light. And once you start to realize that every single being has that light within them, the shell doesn't matter, okay? So really, really important that you start to work on that distortion. Now, envy. Envy is basically when we're looking at somebody else's life path and we're thinking somehow it's better than ours, somehow you deserve more, or that person shouldn't be where they are. They're undeserving of their position. When we get our minds mixed up in this sort of chaotic sense, it does more damage to us than it ever does to the other person. It is us saying that we are not good enough. The way that we were created, the perfection that we were created in, our uniqueness is not enough. And that's absolutely incorrect. Each and every one of us is so beautiful in our own way, and we're on a path that is equally as important as the other. So essentially that you understand this. There should never be a point where you ever look at another being and want to be that being or want to take on their journey. Because again, you're not where they're at. You are not them. They are not you. Whatever their lessons are more difficult than you can ever imagine. And your lessons are more difficult for them than they could ever imagine. But you're all doing what you're supposed to be doing. So take that right out of your thought patterning. It's not equitable. It's not doing anything for you. And just even taking out that one domino from the whole line will create massive success for you. Don't look at other people's lives and project anything onto them other than goodwill. Even your worst enemy. This is why, again, Jesus taught, love your enemies. He didn't mean like hate somebody and then love them. He just meant don't even allow that concept into your mind. There are no enemies. There is no negative will against any other being. It must not exist if you are meant to excel. If you're meant to take your soul to the next level, you can't exist in that energy. You have to move past it. So again, things that I suggest you don't do. Don't go on other people's social media and creep on them and be like, oh, she did this or he did that. Don't do that. Just stay right out of that energy. I've never in my life looked at somebody else's profile. It's irrelevant to me. It's not that I don't love them and care for them. It's just not, in terms of my own diligence, it has no usefulness to me. Don't make harsh comments or gossip about others. Again, this is a very dark energy that won't propel you into positive places. It's not good for you. I suggest a book called The Four Agreements. Beautiful book, but it talks a lot about that. Don't make up stories that are untrue about others, or you're not sure. So what I mean by this is, don't take a little piece of what some little birdie told you and spin it into something so that you're entertaining to somebody else. That is a very useless form of information transfer, and you'll find karmically that it does nothing for you and it does nothing for the world at large. Don't be catty, don't be unkind, don't judge others, don't delight in the seeming failures or shortcomings of others. Okay? I see this a lot. It's like, laughing at others' expense, or somehow gloating when somebody is knocked off of what you think is their pedestal. We see this a lot with celebrities. A celebrity has something terrible happen and everybody wants to really focus on that story. That's a distortion, and it hurts you. When you gravitate to that insidious behavior, you're only drawing yourself close to a very low negative vibration, so stay away from that type of energy. Don't become frustrated when others are recognized for success. Your time will come. Everybody's hour in the sun or day in the sun has already been predetermined. It will happen for you in its time, but don't be upset when somebody else's time to shine. That's when you should be applauding them. That's when you should be cheerleading them. And that is the most beautiful thing that really can manifest. And when we can see somebody else in their glory, we should be thanking our lucky stars, because what happens when any other being gets to experience that, they are actually sending such positive energy waves out into the universe that it is actually affecting all of us on a cellular level. So every time we see somebody else in their glory, we want to say, yes, 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 because again, it only helps the vibration of the entire planet. So that's kind of the end of that one, that distortion. Now, the next one, and I'm going to just check my time here. I think I'm not going to run into the virtues this time because we're not going to have enough time to get through them, but I am going to be able to get through the last of the deadly sins, okay? The distortion of lust. This one, again, is something that is very connected to the distortion of vanity. And again, very pervasive. This is because planet Earth has been a male-dominated planet for so many thousand years. And part of that masculine energy tends to be a distortion in the way of the visual. Okay, it's a very visually orientated distortion. And this is why we see this so prevalently on planet Earth. Now, the original reason that union was created was because our universe is created on duality. The entire construct of our universe is that principle of duality. And it's so that the energy of love could see a reflection of itself and understand and experience itself on the other perspective, if that makes sense. Again, it doesn't always translate in language, but that's why duality was created, so that love could have a reflection of itself. So again, it can only really manifest perfectly and in perfect resonance when there's no encumbrances between the two entities. So that means there's absolutely no power struggle, and all you see is respect between them. When there is dominance or when there is manipulation of any type between the masculine or the feminine energy, what happens is then that relationship is distorted, okay? And there's a million different ways for this to manifest, and it's very damaging for the feminine energy, and it's very damaging for the masculine energy. There's a lot more I'm going to teach about this in terms of the actual seed of creation and how each soul is created and how it manifests, throughout its time here on earth. But basically, a foundational principle to understand that it is very essential to balance the way that we interact with the masculine and feminine. And the highest expression of communion or divine love is when the masculine and feminine meet on an equal playing ground, or without any encumbrances or any chaotic energies, and it's a balanced unification, okay? And yes, because we're in a three-dimensional reality, and right now we have perception in terms of a body, okay? We're existing in a mind, and we're actually, feeling our senses through a body. So through our nervous system and through our five senses, we do experience reality in terms of having a body. So when we think of the masculine and feminine coming together, and again, that can be same sex or opposite sexes, that can express obviously with two bodies coming together. But the way that it's often manifesting in this reality, it's a distortion. It's and again, I'm going to kind of list these off. Try not to act when we're thinking about connecting with the other dominant force. So if you're very, very dominantly masculine, or if you're very, very dominantly feminine, try not to come from a place of desire. And what I mean by this is that you're not desiring a body. You're not trying to desire their body and, like an animal, rip it apart or do whatever you're going to do with it, right? Like it's not the truest expression of love, okay? Seek purity, love, and connection. And what I mean by that is there's a way to connect in terms of a body that is not, it's all encompassing. So it's eye contact, it's the way that you're listening to the other person, it's the fact that you're engaged, it's the fact that you're in utter respect. There's so many principles to this, and again, I'll teach this in another lesson, but it's very elegant, and it's a mastery. It's not something that is cheap, it's not something that you can find on a Friday night at a bar. It doesn't manifest that way. It's not quick and dirty like that. It takes time, it builds up, there's an energy and a momentum. When you really are bringing yourself into that state of divine union, there's nothing like it. There's nothing you can even experience like it, but again, it's something that you have to train yourself to come to that precipice. It's not going to happen until you've purified yourself, essentially. So you have to correct your distortions and come to a place where you are pure before that's going to manifest within the three-dimensional reality that you see, okay? The body, it's not love. It's a vehicle. The body can be a tool of love, but to individuals or beings that, say, subscribe to pornography, and unfortunately, it proliferates our current society. And I'm not going to say I'm judging it or it's bad or it's wrong. I'm just saying it's a major distortion. You know, if you look at something or physical form or something that you see, you are shutting all of your senses off. So you're doing yourself such a disservice and you're hurting your complete aura by engaging in something that is flat. It's going to be the same thing as smoking a crack pipe. It's quick, it's easy, it's done, and then you need another hit. There is nothing sustainable and there's nothing that's going to be extended or accentuated or filling you up. When we think of creating that union, seek to understand the other and others. But if we're talking about a significant other that you want to actually connect with in this way, seek to understand them, seek to know them fully, seek to respect them. And it's not an imbalanced relationship. You don't put them on a pedestal, they don't put you on a pedestal, but you never also put yourself low or put themselves. It's very equal. It's sustainable in the fact that there's no chaos. It's kind of this equilibrium that is everlasting. So again, it's not something that you're going to be able to manifest necessarily until you have really cleansed yourself of a lot of distortions, but you'll also find that once you have, it will be there for you. It's going to be something that you're emitting out to the universe, and therefore that equal vibration will just find you when you basically come back into your own home vibration. Once you have set that equilibrium, it just finds you. Noticing that when you're in the presence of love, it won't diminish. And again, this doesn't happen all the time, but I'm sure each and every one of you can remember a time where you met another human being where it was just very authentic, very pure, and there was nothing really lower vibrational about it. And I guarantee you that particular meeting will be ingrained in you still to this day. You'll still think about it. And the reason why you do is because true love always expands. It's always going to be there. It's a high that never ends. It doesn't stop, it doesn't let you down, it doesn't have a fallout point. And that's why you keep coming back to it, because the energy of it keeps filling you. It's unconditional, it's everlasting. So those are the types of high vibrational love that you want to seek towards and that you want to manifest within your world. You'll also notice as you start to understand this more, any type of feelings towards that kind of, and like lust is such a weird word, but anyways, you know what I'm talking about. That kind of feeling, it just goes away. You just are like, you just have no interest in it. It's almost like smoking cigarettes and all of a sudden now you don't want to smoke. You can't even imagine smoking a cigarette. It's the same thing. Once you experience such a high vibrational love, anything less is just like a cigarette. You just don't, it's just no good for you anymore. You only want to manifest that high vibrational bliss. And again, that is only going to raise the vibration of our planet higher and higher. And the more of us that seek that type of relationship. Another example of this would be, have you ever been around a couple, whether it be at a party or a restaurant, and they're magnetic? It just feels like there's a glow around them. People flock to them. It's just, you can tell that the oscillation in terms of the thought vibrations between those two entities is just so high. Everybody is pulled in. It's like a magnetic force. And that's equating to the fact that they are in a very high vibrational state of love, and they're emitting that, and everybody can feel that, and it attracts other people to them. So again, you want to be in a state where you become one of these transmitters of that very high vibrational energy. Again, my last point is lust will never bring you satisfaction or peace of mind. So when we're talking about lusting after a body. Anytime that you're doing that, and this is too why I think that if we look at old world examples of it, it's not that 100% that it was taught wrong. It's just when it's taught as a sin, people feel bad about doing it. It's more so that if you're acting that way, or you're gravitating towards that sort of more low vibrational attraction to bodies, or bodies doing things, or whatever it is, the fallout is quick. You know, you need to see that again in, you know, the next day, or in the next 10 hours, or what. Like, it's something that you have to go back to all the time to kind of get that little high. And you'll notice as well that when you're really fixating on bodies doing things to each other, like the whatever it is, it has to become weirder and weirder and weirder to get you to get to that high. I mean, the distortion has to become more and more extreme, because again, the connection isn't accurate. So, you know, I want to teach more about this in depth, because again, it's very scientific, it's very interesting, and probably a little bit taboo in terms of people talking about it this way. But I'm going to give you a brief overview this evening so that I can kind of let you dip your toes into some of the strange microcosms of the human mind that we'll get into. But that's the whole purpose of this, is, you know, really deep learning. The last distortion that I'm going to go through tonight, and again, we'll shut it down after that, is the distortion of apathetic behavior. And just that feeling of purposelessness, or that feeling that you don't know what to do. Again, this is just a distortion. It doesn't mean that if you have been lazy, or you can't get out of bed till 11 o'clock in the morning, that you're a bad person and you're not doing your life right. It means that you haven't calibrated your thinking to a way that creates positive momentum and high vibrational existence. That's all it means. It's not a sin, it's not bad, it's just you need to learn the correct way of using your vehicle so that you can create the best possible life for yourself. And it's selfish in a sense, but if you think of it, the fact that you're actually going to be creating a better planet for everybody, the more happy that you are, the more full that you are, the more you can serve others. It actually becomes service to others. It's kind of like when you're on an airplane. You have to put the oxygen mask on yourself before you put it on your child. You have to save yourself before you can help to save others. You know, if you're walking around and you're a miserable entity, yet you're trying to help everybody else, you're really doing no good, because you're still a miserable entity. You need to be a beautiful, shining, positive, radiant being. And then with that energy that you've created, you go and you pull people up and you teach them. You don't judge them, you teach them. You teach them the correctness of thought so that they can empower themselves, so that they can help others. It's like compound interest. You know, it's pay it forward. It's this beautiful momentum that, you know, basically you start a ripple and that ripple continues on, and that's part of our purpose here. That's all we are. We're all just a body of little ripples, and we are interconnected, and we're meant to affect each other. But with that, again, we have to understand the initial ripple we are creating. So I think my take-home message is really pay attention to these 7 aspects. I want to teach the other side of them when we meet again, and some of the positive aspects. So I don't want to leave you with all negative. But yeah, that is the end of today's lesson.